is that hinders personal awareness?
Be aware of our surroundings.
What hinders personal awareness?
Yeah.
Okay, priorities. Jesus isn't included in our priorities or in our busyness. Like you said, busy. He's not. Okay. Someone else? That's good. Yes, the emotions.
Yeah, I said mind, will, and emotions. The whole thing, you
Okay,
know.
thoughts. Thoughts go into it. Our emotions.
Our attitudes, our
Unbelief, disappointments, betrayal,
Unbelief,
Aaron
disappointments.
had a
Betrayal. What was that, Benita? Distractions. He was distracted. He didn't. Let's find out something else at that point. It's all right.
Shiny objects. Anything that grabs our attention.
Shiny objects. Yes.
We're all rednecks, you know? We don't know what they're.
Ultimately, our beliefs. Our beliefs. How many people have ever said, well, it's in the Bible? What's the key to reading the Bible? It's knowing how to interpret it. How many know there's one single Bible, but how many denominations are there?
lots.
Everybody says it's in the Bible. That's not the key. How you interpret that thing and apply that thing.
And sometimes people think it's in the Bible and it's not in the Bible.
But one of the keys to life, it's not what happens or doesn't happen. How do we interpret what happens?
That's right.
What we think is important, what isn't important.
It all goes back to our beliefs.
Yeah.
And we interpret according to our beliefs. We see according to our beliefs. We can read almost anything into the Bible. Almost anything we can read into, we can.
I know.
But by the grace, the unmerited favor of God given to me, I warn everyone. This is Paul speaking. Everyone among you not to estimate and think of yourself more highly than he ought. Not to have an exaggerated opinion of his own importance, but to rate his ability with sober judgment. How do you do that? How do you have the correct understanding of who you are in your perceptions? That's what's being said here. Living then in pure grace, it's important that you not misinterpret yourselves as people. Don't misinterpret who you really are. How do you like this? The only accurate way, this is the same passage. This is the Message version. This is the Amplified. The only accurate way to understand ourselves is by what God is and by what He does for us. Not by what we are and what we do for Him.
Amen.
What do you think about that? The only accurate way to understand ourselves and reality is by what God is and by what He does for us. How do you figure that out? How do you know that? How does that, knowing what God is, help you see what reality is? How does that work?
God created reality, so reality is not real. It's something that was created. It wasn't original.
When you start to know God, you start to know how He thinks and how He believes. And then you can gauge yourself. Do I think like Him or do I not think like Him? That's how you understand who you are. Because He's truth, and He's light, and He's life. And you can find out how off you are or how on you are. You can find find out who you are by comparing it to what's true. Isn't that how you do it? How do you know the length of something? You got to have the ruler out. You got to compare it to something that's true. That's how you find out who you are. That's how you understand yourself. How many want to understand themselves? Do you want to know who you are? Do you want to get who you are? Do you want to understand who you are? This is what happened to King Uzziah. This is what happened to Isaiah. The year that King Uzziah died. King Uzziah was a good king in Israel. For 40 years he was king. Isaiah was depressed. He was down. He went into the temple. And then he says, I saw the Lord. I don't think he went into the temple every day and saw the Lord. This day it happened. How many know you open up the Bible, you don't get nothing out of it? You open up the Bible, you don't get nothing out of it. Keep opening up the Bible. Sooner or later. Sooner or later, God's going to speak to you. If you're on a heart that it says, Jesus says, seek and you'll find, knock and the door will be open to you.
That's right.
If you continue to seek, you will find. If you're a seeker, you're eventually going to find. And here's King Uzziah. Here's Isaiah. He came in, and the year that King Uzziah died, he says, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on the throne, the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were these seraphs, these angels. Each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces. With 2 they covered their feet. With 2 they were flying. That's a different creature. Why were they covering their eyes and covering their feet? It's like God's too much. There's too much light. And they were calling to one another, not to God. They were holy, holy, holy. Have you ever had, you wake up, someone turns the light on, you wake up, what do?
Pull the covers over.
It's too much! It's too much light! They were around God, the light was too much, man. They got to hide their eyes, they got to cover their feet, and this is enough light. I don't need to see anything more than just this. They got the offshoot light. They were calling one, holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty, the whole earth is full of His glory. And at the sound of their voices, the doorposts and the threshold shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. What a picture. And look what Isaiah says.
Yeah.
Woe to me, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips. I live with people of unclean lips. My eyes have seen the King. He saw who he was when he saw God. He saw who he was when he encountered God. That's who we see who we are. That's who we see where we're at when we encounter God. And one of the seraphs flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with the tongs from the altar. With it, he touched my mouth and said, see, this has touched your lips, your guilt has been taken away, and your sin atoned for. Then I heard a voice. Okay, all of a sudden, guilt's taken away. Sin atoned for. Then I heard a voice of the Lord say, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? He says, here I am, send me. I don't think we find out who we are by looking to God. Oftentimes we do this. We do not dare to classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they are not wise. I don't think we compare ourselves with God. We compare ourselves with people. That's how we know who we are. That's how we feel about ourselves. That's how we understand ourselves. Our comparison with people, not our comparison with God. If you compare yourselves with others, that's not wise. That's not good. That's not a good thing to do.
That's right.
How many know people are bad standards? You hook yourself up with me as a pastor, I'm going to disappoint you. And if I get in your life and you get in my life, you're going to disappoint me. I'm doing my best. I want to try to get out of the way. That's my object. I try to get out of the way and point to the way. If you put me up high, I'm going to go down low. I don't believe it when people put me up too high, and I don't believe it when people put me down too low. I'm just a guy. Is there anything we can do to increase our spiritual awareness and perception? We'll ask the questions, and we're almost done. Is there anything we can do to increase our spiritual awareness and perception?